There is a Jewish tradition which states that on the day that a bride and groom get married, all of their sins are forgiven. The basis for this relates to a certain degree to this week's parsha. The end of this week's parsha, the Torah relates the wives and the children of Esav, the brother of Yaakov. We all know Esav to be a very unsavory individual, and nonetheless the Torah goes and enumerates all of the children and descendants of Esav Adosha. In describing his various marriages and whom he married, the Torah tells us that he married a woman by the name of Basmat. The reason she was called Basmat is because she used to involve herself in making incense for idolatry, and the rabbis comment and say that we actually see elsewhere that her name is not indeed Basmat, but Mochalat. How do we reconcile the two various instances that names a woman on the one hand Basmat, on the other hand Mochalat? And the answer is that when the Torah describes her as Machalat, it does so in the context of her getting married to Esav. The name Machalat comes from the root of Machal, Mechila, forgiveness. And it is from the marriage of Esav to this woman that the principle is derived for every single one of us, that the day we get married, a person's sins are forgiven. I think it is a glaring question as to why it is that of all the marriages that take place, both before this occasion and later on, the one marriage which God feels should be an icon of forgiveness, should be emblematic of the concept that on the day of a marriage the bride and groom's sins are forgiven, should come from no other source than Esav Harasha, the wicked Esav. As I said, Esav was a highly unsavory individual, a murderer, a thief, a rapist, every bad character trait that a human being could have was all bundled into this one person called Esav. And yet it is he that serves as a lesson for us in all future generations. You know, the Yetzer Hara is a very wily and a very smart being. The evil inclination, that drive that motivates a person to do the wrong thing, should never be misconstrued and underestimated as being a foolish, elderly individual, but rather has to always be acknowledged as being a very powerful and potent, a very wily and strong creature. One of the great ploys of the evil inclination is to allow a person to consider and to think that since I have deviated so far from the path of Yiddishkeit, since for such a protracted period of my life I have not in actual fact kept to any of my ancestral rituals, beliefs and faiths, a person will turn around and say, what's the point now? I am so far gone. I am so beyond the pale of anything Jewish in a religious sense that I may as well just realize that any inspiration I derive is pointless. There is no point in me acting upon it because at the end of the day I am too far gone. A person feels that from time to time. We become so acclimatized to our normal way of life, and we become so distant gradually from Yiddishkeit, from Torah authentic Yiddishkeit, that when we have a fleeting moment of inspiration, we convince ourselves, or rather the evil inclination convinces us, that we're too far gone. And it's for this indeed that we learn this important message of forgiveness of sins, not from great individuals, not from people who were mediocre, not from people who had both good as well as bad like all humans, but rather we learn it from a person who is so far gone that almost there is no redeeming aspect to him. And we learn it from a man like Esau. And we recognize that even a man like Esau, given the correct inspirational moment, a time of mechila, a time of forgiveness, can in actual fact turn not a new page, not a clean slate, and not even a new chapter, but can close and throw away the old book and start a brand new book, a fresh start, literally from scratch, where the entire past is erased and one is starting afresh, and one is able to redefine and recreate one's own personality, one's own identity, and certainly one's own spiritual aspirations. And therefore it's specifically from Esau, from a person who is more far gone than any of us is familiar with. And nevertheless, even an Esau can have all of his sins forgiven with the correct inspirational moment. Even he can have his sins forgiven. And therefore the message for all of us is very simple. We all deviate at one point or a time. We all perhaps may even do so on such a regular basis that we no longer see that behavior as deviant at all. But in a moment of inspiration, at that moment in time, we are able to totally transform, to totally erase the negativity of the past and start totally afresh. The concept of tshuva can be learned from no better a person than from Esau. That even a person who is like Esau, the pathway of tshuva, the pathway of returning to God, to our heritage, to our traditions and to our culture, to Torah and to mitzvahs, is never closed, and indeed is never far from any Jew. Good Shabbos.